Het is wel zo. Ja. Yes, dat zijn ze allemaal. Please be seated. Dear friends, family, and colleagues of Professor Lopes Cardozo, dear students here with us today or online, welcome. My name is Kees Storm. I'm the Dean of the Department of Applied Physics and Science Education, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Blue Hall here at Eindhoven University of Technology for the valedictory lecture of Professor Lopes Cardozo, who I will call Niek from now on because we're basically neighbors in the department. Let me briefly take you back 30 years ago. Nearly 30 years. Back to January 19 of 1996, that was the day of Niek's inaugural lecture here in Eindhoven. The title of this lecture was Langzaam zo snel als wij kunnen, which translates to Let's take it slow as fast as we can. And Niek borrowed this title from a book by Dutch poet Toon Tellegen, who is particularly known for his short stories about animals. And one of the stories in this book is about a beetle that collects secrets. In its house are shelves and shelves full of secrets, and on the top shelf it keeps the false secrets. On the middle shelf it keeps the unsolvable secrets, and on the bottom shelf is where it keeps those secrets that will soon be unraveled. And I wonder where Niek thinks this beetle should keep the secret of nuclear fusion. At first, probably it was somewhere on the middle shelf among the other unsolvable secrets, but in recent years, it may well have moved increasingly towards the bottom shelf, with the other secrets soon to be revealed. And if that secret has moved, then that is in no small part due to Niek's efforts. He's never been one to accept the more skeptical timelines for fusion, and from day one of his professorship was among those eager to light the actual fusion fire as soon as possible. Even earlier this year in the Eindhoven's Dagblad, Niek predicted the first active fusion reactors to arrive on the scene somewhere between 2030 and 2040, and I trust him on that. Because if there is one person we should trust on this, it is Niek. And sure, there are few like him who combine the required deep understanding of the science and technology of nuclear fusion with a masterful gift for communication that is needed to convince audiences of the benefits of fusion power. But there are other enthusiastic advocates that are able to do similar things. And what sets Niek apart from that crowd is that he also dares to share and even embrace his doubts and his reservations. And this is a valuable and I would say necessary characteristic for a university professor, because it is dangerous to be too certain of anything. And generally, that is a strategy that closes a person off to further learning. And those who become unable to learn cannot be great teachers. And Niek obviously is an outstanding teacher. And I trust that he will share his convictions, doubts, and insights from all of those years one last time with us today in his lecture with the intriguing title, Fusion Power, Really? A Gift from the Super Rich? Should we accept? And as most of you will know, today is not the first time that Niek's asking questions like these. In fact, he's done so his entire scientific career. Let me briefly tell you about a few highlights from this long career in full realization that there's far too much to cover there to even attempt to be complete. Niek was the director of the Dutch Fusion Research Program at the VOM Institute for Plasma Physics, now called DIFFER. He was the chairman of the science domain in the executive board of the Dutch Research Council, and before that, chairman of VOM, the funding organization for physics research that was cherished by the field and still stands, to me, as an outstanding example of how the interface between science and government can, or perhaps should be organized. Our president, Robert Jan Smits, here today with us, likes to remind us deans here at Eindhoven that Niek was one of the very few people that he would regularly see when he was still in Brussels, an example that he still would dearly like to see copied abundantly at this university. And at this university, Niek initiated the interdisciplinary master's program in science and technology of nuclear fusion in 2009, which continues to be a shining beacon of excellence at our university. He was a valued member of our university's ethical review board and initiated the European Fusion Education Network FuseNet, Starting out with 36 members, it was later transformed into the Independent FuseNet Association, headquartered right here in Eindhoven, which today has some 70 members and is still thriving. And all of this he did while remaining a productive and impactful scientist in his field. The list is far longer, but time is limited, and I'm standing between you and the lecture of Niek. Dear Niek, you started off your professorship here in Eindhoven with a reference to a book by Toon Tellegen, and I think it might be fitting to end with Tellegen as well. The last paragraph in the story about the beetle with those shells full of secrets goes like this. The beetle's biggest worry was that sooner or later it would run out of space, or would be no longer able to cope with the work alone, or that it would become curious, really curious, but would be in pain or fever. That would be terrible. Thinking about that, it shook its head and was glad it couldn't see into the future. Niek, you and this defeatist beetle could not be more different. You have been looking into the future, and you have made sure that none of the beetle's worries should apply. The work continues. Secrets will continue to be added and resolved, but because of your work and the people you have engaged and involved in the field is ready for it. And I do hope that you, like the beetle, will remain really curious, and I trust that for many years to come, you'll be a close witness to, and who knows, actor in, the further unfolding of the fusion secret. The bottom line here is that as TU Eindhoven, we are incredibly proud and thankful that Niek has been associated with our university for so long. A leader, a figurehead, an activist, a teacher, and a mentor. And likewise, I think the entire physics community owes you a debt of gratitude for your many years of leadership and service. Thank you, Niek, for showing us that not only atoms, but colleagues as well, can be an inexhaustible source of energy. We are going to miss you.
Dear Chair, dear President, dear colleagues, dear former colleagues, dear students, friends, family, and all who took the trouble of being here, in person or online, and who add meaning and luster to this gathering with your presence. It's a privilege to share this final hour of my life as a professor with you. It's a special day. I had the weirdest dream last night. And in the dream, probably something to do with my retirement, but I presented myself at the pearly gates and had a one-on-one interview with God. And God asked me, Niek, is there anything at all that's on your mind that you would like to get rid of? And I said, well, I've been in fusion research for 43 years. And for 43 years, people have come up to me with a glum smile on their face, so pleased with themselves, and said, fusion, 30 years away, and will always be. And now I should like to know, will it ever work? And God scratched their head and said, well, I don't know, but maybe in 30 years. Then the God in my dream may not have realized that mankind would divvy up wealth in such a way that 25 richest people in the world would own as much as the poorer half of the world population. These people are so rich that they could actually give fusion power to the world, save climate change, save energy transition once and for all as a gift. Is that a true statement? Is that actually possible? Wasn't there a reason why fusion hasn't been put to practice yet? something to do with tiny cross-sections and crazy high temperatures. Surely money doesn't trump the laws of nature. You can't buy a perpetuum mobile for any amount of bitcoins. On the other hand, suppose that we reach the point where engineers and scientists agreed that we know enough, there's the technology base, there's the knowledge base, to actually have a fair shot at building the first fusion power plant. In such a situation, would it help if private companies would step in and private funders would step in and speed up the process? In the same way that SpaceX has been much faster and more effective at building rockets than NASA has. And we should also query the other side of the equation. Suppose this was the case. Do we actually want fusion? Is fusion as nice, as wonderful as people make it out to be? If it isn't, are we in a position, seeing climate change, to say no thanks to an energy source that actually could provide for the mankind for a long time and for a large part with the energy it needs? And if we do want it, do we want it as a gift? Is there such a thing as a gift from the super rich? Maybe not. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even told you what nuclear fusion is. So let us go back. Does this work? Not really, is it? Yeah, there it goes. Okay, you missed this, but fusion is the process whereby we combine the nuclei of light atoms, and it's the process, it's the one way, the most effective way in which nature can transform mass into energy. It does so about 10 million times more effective than the chemical reactions that occur when you burn fossil fuel. So yeah, it's an energy source. It's the one energy source we know that works. We know how it works. It's the energy source of the stars, of the universe. And we haven't managed to put it to practice yet. And yes, it does have a rather wonderful poster, as you can see. Well, this poster was made in the 1920s, as you can see. And it says, fusion energy could be safe, clean, and sustainable forever, basically. Yeah, if you look at the websites of companies or institutions that try to sell you fusion, they look a bit different now, a bit more in your face, if you like. A bit more like this, or that. But if you read all those texts, it goes very quickly. It's limitless, clean, safe, secure. I think you get the gist. Yeah. I don't know how it is with you, but if I see this kind of slogans, at some point I think, I'm reminded of Yogi Berra. And I think, of all the lies I've just been told, half ain't even true. I'll come back to that. Fusion isn't nearly as wonderful as people would have you believe. But yes, it does. It doesn't emit CO2. It is rather clean. It is very safe, and there is enough fuel for a very long time. So let's give it a shot, shall we? Now you'll think, probably, the reason that we don't have it yet must be because it's very difficult to achieve. No, this is not the case. Actually, fusion is very easy. It's child's play, really, literally. There are plenty of reports of children, let's say teenagers, who built a fusion reactor, a working fusion reactor, in the garage of their parents. It all starts in the IKEA, where you buy a salad bowl like this. Actually, you buy two. As you can see, they've been lowered in price. It's a bestseller. No doubt because of all the teenagers that wanted to build a fusion power plant in their garage. You buy two of those, you put them together like this. You solder and put a bit of solder in between. You stick on a high voltage vacuum feed through a very simple vacuum pump. On the inside, you put a grid, a spherical grid like this. Like this. Oops, that's a bit fast, sorry. I wanted to show you the transition. You stick it on a grid. It's not coming. Hello. Yes. Well, okay. Doesn't want to go slowly. You put in a grid. You apply a voltage between the salad bowls and the grid, and Bob is your uncle. This makes, well, actually, this is one that's been made by our students. It's a tad more, let's say, professional than the salad bowl contraption, but it makes about 10 million fusion reactions per second. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah, that is the equivalent of about a microwatt. You can charge your phone with it if you have a century to wait for it to be charged. And as you can see, it emits rather a lot of light, so no, this is in no way is this going to be energy efficient. If you wanted to make a fusion reactor that actually makes energy, you would have to confine the plasma in a much smarter way, using magnetic fields, for instance, and you'd have to make it much bigger, and it would look like this. Yeah, it would look like this. There we go. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. This machine is called ITER, International Collaboration Project. It was born as a peace project when Gorbachev and Reagan met in 1985 in the so-called peace talks. There were not a lot of things they could agree about. So they said, well, why don't we build a fusion reactor together? And so it was born as a peace project, and the thing cost 20 billion. But as one of my colleagues put it, for a peace project, it's not even expensive. And actually, it is a peace project, because these are the countries that work together closely in ITER. And you can say about it what you want, but there are colleagues from all these countries working together in one team, and these countries in practically every other field in the world, if they're not at war, at least they are not best of friends. So yeah, it actually is a peace project. Note that it's also very big. There's a person, and this is going to be an issue, because these machines are so big and so expensive that they take long to build, and yeah. So the roadmap with machines like this, from here to fusion power, well, to society, would be first build ITER, then we build, this is a scientific experiment, then we build demo, a demonstrator, and only then do we get proper fusion power plants that look like this. So there's a roadmap, ITER demo, first generation. The picture that comes with it is like this. And if we put dates to it, you find first plasma in ITER, so start of operation in ITER, maybe in 2030, maybe in 2035. Full performance, it takes a while to bring it up to full performance, maybe in 2040. Then decision to build the next one, demo, maybe in 2045. Start construction, takes at least 10 years to put it together, and to bring it to electricity production, maybe 2060. And that's only the first, the first power plants. But we don't need one, or we don't need 10, we need 10,000 of those. So that is the work I've been doing over the past years, where you said, okay, how fast could we build 10,000 power plants? Well, it would take about 60 years, if we are very quick. So when I saw this, and when I analyzed this, and I saw this about 7, 8 years ago, I thought, well, this isn't going anywhere. This is not a roadmap. This is, well, let's say a science program. It was at the 70th anniversary of the FOM organization, already mentioned, 7 years ago. Actually in the autumn of 2016, that I sat together with Hans Chang, who at the time was the director of the Royal Academy. And I shared my concerns with him. And he said, well, why don't we organize a meeting, an expert meeting in the Royal Academy with experts from wind and solar and fission and fossil and fusion, of course, to discuss the future of fusion. I'm still thankful to Hans and Wim van Saarloos, who was at the time the president of the Academy, for organizing that workshop, because it really allowed me to develop a new perspective on the future of fusion. And one of the persons who was there was a good friend of mine, Dennis White, professor at MIT, at the time, until recently, the director of the the nuclear technology, the nuclear engineering department at MIT. And Dennis and I go back a long time, and several times we have reached the same conclusions concerning fusion strategy via completely independent routes. So it's always nice if we meet. So at that occasion, we had a coffee before we met in Amsterdam before the workshop. We had a coffee, and turned out that he agreed completely with everything I had written in the input paper. Reached the same conclusion, but then Dennis is a very resilient and resourceful person, and he, having also realized that ITER and demo are going to go way too slow to make any impact, he had gotten a bunch of PhD students together, and he had told them, look, we are MIT, we are the best engineering school in the world. They say that at MIT too. We are the best engineering school in the world. Surely we can devise a fusion power plant that is much smaller, much smarter, much cheaper, much quicker to build than ITER. And they did exactly that. So they had the design, and then Dennis went to see big-time investors. Actually, he was talking to Bill Gates and the like. That was very hush-hush at the time. He shared it with me, but I was not supposed to share it with others. But that happened exactly at that moment in time. Well, the rest is history, so to speak. A year later, a company was founded. It's called Commonwealth Fusion Systems. It got funded to build, basically to start building their new device. Now, a question to you: if a bunch of PhD students would come to you and they said, "We have made a design for a fusion reactor that has the same specs in terms of output performance as ITER, the 20 billion ITER." But it's much more, it's 40 times smaller, and it uses a magnet technology that doesn't exist yet. And they have no experience of building anything, they have no experience of running a business. Would you fund them? Just looking at, maybe not, huh? Yeah, but somebody did. Somebody did to the tune of $2 billion. That's not bad for a startup. And today, they are building their device. So first they demonstrated the new magnet technology. Now they're building the device. They expect to build it within 4 years, I think. It should be ready by the end of next year. And that's a machine that is very similar to ITER. And then they'll build the next one, which already is designed, which is similar to demo. And they expect to have that ready 5 or 7 years later. And so far, they seem to be on schedule. Okay, now that seemed to be the start. I'm running ahead of my slides, I see. That seemed to be the start of a run of the capital investments. So a few years later, we got headings like this. Fusion funding soars as serious money. Yes, serious money. Billions is serious money, right? On the energy of the stars. And this was only the beginning. So the number of private companies that is actually building fusion power plants is taking off. And when did it start to take off? Yes, exactly. There. Yes. So, Hans, Wim, if you ever organize an expert meeting in the Royal Academy, know what you sign up for. Yeah, but really that was a pivotal moment in time. It was the time when both people realized that ITER and demo were going to go too slow, but also when they realized that the scientific basis and the technology basis was there to start actually building commercial fusion power plants. Now I should say, all of this is of course based on the knowledge that was generated in the government-funded programs. And nobody contests that, and it really is all that knowledge that has been created in labs like and universities like ours that made it possible for those companies to start developing new ideas for fusion power plants. So yeah, it's a super exciting time. Actually, also in the regular government-funded programs, we see a lot of news. There hasn't been any news for about a decade and a half, but the last few years, yes, lots of things are happening. So just 2 years ago, the big joint European torus had set new records for energy released in the fusion reactor, I should say. So there we go. Then later that year, so December 22, in a way, competing technology using lasers to compress the fuel of a fusion reactor achieved ignition, which means it starts to burn of itself, for the first time. And a year later, they published a paper where they said, but last year, it was not just a one-off. We can repeat this process now. It's not just America and Europe either. So China is breaking record after record. Korea is doing the same. And just 2 months ago, yet another record broken by the joint European torus in England. Now, before you lose your cool over this, the American experiment freed up 3.5 megajoules of energy. Yeah. Now that number may not say you very much, but if you eat a bar of chocolate, you eat more calories, more joules than the megajoules that were created there. And JET, that phenomenal record set of 69 megajoules, if you would sell that on the open market, you not even get €1 for it. But still, they were genuine scientific breakthroughs. And you could say they marked the point where we could now say, well, actually, the knowledge base is so far developed that it becomes a reasonable claim that with the knowledge we have, we can now start to build fusion power plants much quicker than the ITER demo route. Yeah, let's go back to those startups then. I mentioned one, the Commonwealth Fusion System. So they raised initially, well, in the meantime, 2.1 or 2, even a bit more billions to commercialize fusion energy, and they want to go really fast. But they're not the only one, so there's another one called Helion. And if you look at the pictures, the Commonwealth Fusion Systems would be a donut-shaped reactor. This is something very different. And then there's another one called General Fusion, which is yet very different. It's again hot plasma, but now there are pistons that push, that mechanical pistons that create a shock wave that initiates, that ignites the plasma, backed by Jeff Bezos. And then there's another one based in England that uses high-temperature superconductors to make strong magnets. And then there's one in Europe. Europe was lagging behind, but now they're picking up. So there's, just to mention just one, Renaissance Fusion raised money with yet another concept for a magnetic confinement machine. And another very interesting one is, so there are about 50 now, so I'm not going to mention all of them. But another very interesting one I'd call Gauss fusion, which is not a bunch of scientists with smart ideas. It's a bunch of industries. It's a consortium of industries that say, we know little about fusion, but we know how to build things. And together we have the technology that is needed to build a fusion power plant. So we work together with the government labs to design a fusion power plant, and we can build it. They are thinking about opening a hub here in Eindhoven too. Now, most of the companies that I've shown were about building a power plant. But of course, they're also the ones that are interested in developing key technologies. Kind of doesn't matter whether it's the one type or the other, technologies that everybody will need, such as remote handling. So we have a company in the Netherlands that says, okay, we develop remote handling for machines like ITER. And we have a spin out of this university. I see some smiles over there and waves. Daan van Vught, who did his PhD with us, started the company Ignition Computing, so the name gives it all away. And they do a lot of smart development of software for, in large part, for fusion power plants. And there's another one that's going to be more waves, I guess. This is okay. So somehow somebody has to take the heat out of the reactor, and I'll develop a technology that does that. So this is Niek Maassen, also an alumni of our university, started a company that does heat pipe technology. Yeah. So what you've seen is a lot of different approaches. So where the government program had said, okay, we need to pick the winner very early on, and then there's just the one line, these companies together try maybe 10, maybe 15 different approaches with modern technology, with modern computing, with modern materials, with developments in technology that have become possible, become feasible, that weren't before. Yeah. Now you may wonder, what did the government think of this? Because they had been funding fusion research for such a long time, and now suddenly others were going to run with the ball. Well, initially they hated it. They even took some companies to court for making false claims. But that lasted only about 2 years or so, because by that time, more private money was flowing into fusion research than government money, and they thought, oh, maybe we should work together. Yeah, so now governments have actually become so excited about the fact that fusion may be around the corner that they started to up their own funding. And not only that, they're also going to compete with each other because, well, as you can see here, I think you can see it here, yes. At COP28, so that was on the 5th of December last year, John Kerry came on stage and he said, okay, nuclear fusion is going to be a cornerstone in the clean energy strategy of the United States. And the subtext to that message was, and we don't want to wait for China to develop this. There's a good reason why he thought that, because China in the meantime was taking out more patents in that field than the US was. And then he thought, okay, maybe we should work together with Japan. And then Japan said, oh, okay, but then maybe we should up our funding and keep up with the race. So now there's a race on. And the UK is also very active in this field. Said, but now weren't we? They invented the word thought leaders, I think, for this. We were the thought leaders. Let's put that to practice. And so they're building their own fusion power plant. It's called STEP, and want to have it up and running in 15 years from now. Germany, somewhat surprisingly, because you never know with the government whether fusion is going to be popular or not, but they also massively invested in this upsurge of interest in fusion. So much so that they actually started a project that absorbed 2 of our star players at Eindhoven University. And this is a reality we have to deal with at the moment. The market is really pulling. So it's good for our students. So then the question came up, but shouldn't we do this together? And so public-private partnerships are really the buzzword at the moment. I'll just show you a few of the headings, but 2 years ago, the United States came up with a fact sheet developing a bold vision for commercial fusion energy. And half a year later, if you read the small print, it says the new public-private partnership program, first step towards this decadal vision. So yes, let's do it together. And here's the implementation of it. There are lots of projects being launched and funded that do exactly that. China, earlier this year, came up with a massive, well, we would call it a public-private partnership. It's a little bit differently defined in China, probably, but it is exactly that. It's industry and government. The UK also launched a public-private partnership. They actually, and this is the way it's done, they have a problem. I'm going to come back to lithium a little bit later, but if they have a problem like purifying lithium, they just say, companies that think they can solve it for us, come forth and we'll give you a grant. They even work with industry for that power plant they're building. Germany, same thing, works with, the government works with startups and companies to make fusion happen as soon as possible. And Europe has to do this in a very transparent way, of course. But they did commission a report on how it could be done, and that was issued a few months ago. So it's an analysis of how Europe should set up these public-private partnerships for fusion. And then, last but not least, here at the DIFFER Institute, Eindhoven University, the IRIS Energy Institute, and DIFFER together organized the first Dutch Fusion Day. We thought we might attract about 50 people from companies and academia. We had to close registration when the room was overbooked. It was a vibrant day, and at the end of the day, we came to a conclusion that I'll repeat later. Now, a question that has been addressed earlier today is how can these startups go so much faster than the government program? And I've tried to condense that in one slide, one picture, and the sentence that goes with it is they plan for learning. They don't select the final solution soon, they plan for learning. So, whereas the government program says, okay, we need to build a machine that has a few radii that depict the technology development and for performance, so you need a machine that makes enough energy and is safe, and a number of things you need at least to run it. Then there's the operation, so if you don't want to run it for an hour, but for a week or for a year, you need some other things. And then there's life cycle issues like materials, how long do they last, and radioactivity and repairs and things. And the government programs, like the ITER demo route, tries, because they have only one shot after all, so they need to build a machine that does everything, that gets everything right. They design the final machine first time. Now, if we want to build 10,000 fusion power plants, how large is the possibility that your first attempt is the best one? Not very large. So, what the startup companies do, say, well, let's first focus on getting performance, and we work a bit on the operation, and the life cycle comes later. And they but they build a machine in 5 years, so the next machine is not 50 years from now, it's 5 years from now. And then they move on in every of those arrows. And I think, if you think of an evolution of a development of an innovation cycle, planning for learning is really the key to success. Those private companies explore many different avenues, as I showed you. Simultaneously, is that smart? Shouldn't we be picking the most, let's say, promising one? Actually, no, we shouldn't. And this is work I did with Sam over the past few years. So if on the horizontal axis there's the number of parallel concept trials, so I didn't put numbers, but let's say it goes from 1 to 30 or so, or from 0 to 30. And on the vertical axis is dollars, either income or expenditure. You would agree with me that the probability of success, if you try more, goes up, but it will never go above 1, maybe not even reach 1, but it's going to be a curve like this, one way or another. And the value, the future value, the minute you think that fusion is going to generate value, the value is going to be proportional to the probability that you'll create that value, that you'll generate that value. And the cost, of course, is something, well, every try costs money, so it goes like this, which means that there's an optimum. Well, we actually calculated this. You can put numbers and equations to this. You can actually solve it on a piece of paper. It comes out that the optimum is typically 5 to 10, maybe even more than that, which in practice means you should try everything, all the ideas that are vaguely reasonable, you should try to optimize value. If you're a research program, you say, okay, this is my budget, I can do one thing. If you're an investor who's interested in creating value, you say, okay, what should I do to maximize that value? And this is what you should do. And interestingly, if you look at the ensemble of all the startups, this is exactly what they do together. And if you look at the investors, many of them now are investment funds, and they spread their money, they spread their risk over many of over multiple of those startups. So clearly, this is what's going on. Now I should come back to half the lies they tell about me aren't even true. Yeah. As you can imagine, it's easy to say that fusion is clean and forever, and it's the future. But surely there are also downsides. And actually, there are a lot of difficulties or downsides, or let's say there are pros and cons, and there are just 3 pros, and there are maybe 20 cons. I find it very difficult to communicate with the public in a balanced way. Because if you want to spell out all the cons, the pros are drowned. If you leave them out, you'd be lying by omission. And scientists, I think if there's one thing that binds us scientists is that we love the truth, whatever it is. And lying is not our business. Still, you have to make a message that fits your audience somehow. But I should say, there's one audience, one group of people to which we never lie. And those are the students. The students in our program, you kind of invite them to join a new field for them and maybe even stay in it for the rest of their lives, or at least commit a very serious commitment. So to those you have to give the brutal truth. So much so that several times students have come up to me and said, "Professor, could you please be a little bit less brutally honest with us?" I said, "I'm sorry, no, I can't. But I do thank you, students, for keeping us honest." But I'll give you one example. We say the fusion reactor uses very little fuel, which is a true statement, because it is a fusion reaction and super efficient. The fuel it uses is lithium, of which there's a lot in the world. So there we go. A big fusion power plant will use about 100 kilograms of lithium per year. That's the amount of lithium that you find in the batteries of 2 Teslas. So if we wanted, we can buy 2 Teslas and throw the Teslas away, keep the lithium. Because you make about $1 billion or so with that amount of lithium. Not a problem. However, inside the reactor, there's about 100 tons of lithium, because the lithium has to catch neutrons, and you don't know where the neutrons go. So you have to have much more lithium in a sort of blanket than the bit you use. Okay, so now it's not so little anymore. But it's not just lithium that we use. We need an isotope, the lithium-6, it's the lighter isotope, which is only 7.5% of natural lithium. So now you need 13 times more natural lithium. So now it's certainly not so little anymore. And now you have to separate out the lithium, the lithium-6 from the natural lithium. And the only process that we know, well, the only process that is known to be at industrial scale uses mercury. And it uses a lot of mercury. It uses about, for one power plant to make the 6 lithium, you would need about 10 million kilograms of mercury just to fill the blanket of that machine with lithium, with 6 lithium. Now, mercury is a very dirty material, and the amount we're talking about is like many times the world annual production of mercury. And it is almost exclusively mined in China. So now it's dirty, it is geopolitically difficult, it's not scalable. Okay. Now I think that we actually can solve this, but it isn't solved at the moment. So you see here, it's not easy to give a straight message. And let me go to the last bit of my talk now. Because when we think about these issues, we should be mindful of the upscaling. Because we are not in this business to build one power plant, we are in this business to build 10,000 fusion power plants. That'd be a fair fraction of the world's energy source. And it's very much the same as with other energy sources. Scaling up by a factor 10,000 changes the face of things. It's one thing to have a wind park here and there. It is quite another thing to fill the North Sea with wind parks. The risk and waste of a single nuclear fission plant are very manageable. Multiplied by 10,000 is a big issue. And let's not forget, 100 years ago, the rate at which you use fossil fuel was very well manageable. The rate at which you use it today is not manageable. Scale it up to today's intensity, and it changes the face of the Earth for good. It's really that last factor of 10 that makes all the difference, which I think goes back to the fact that our collective footprint is several Earths now, and it should have been much less than an Earth. A word about the energy mix, because we think of the energy mix as scientists, like there's wind and solar and fission and maybe fusion. And they have their technologies, they have different specs that can compete or complement each other, and they should be chosen in such a way that we provide the best possible product for society. But the energy mix isn't just that. It's also a mix of different moral dilemmas, of different environmental impact profiles, of different risk profiles, of different ethical connotations, of different emotional responses in society. And all those aspects must be considered when we envisage the energy mix. No energy source is perfect. There are no silver bullets. And we must deal with the fact that the use of energy as we know it comes at a price. Only then can we have a meaningful conversation about the question, should we accept the gift of nuclear fusion? My take on the present status of fusion energy is fusion energy coming? Yes, I believe that the feasibility will be shown within the next decade. Will it be a miracle cure? No, certainly not. And certainly not in the beginning. Fusion power plants will not be very efficient or clean or economical at market introduction, which is why it is so important to plan for learning. Fusion needs to become much better than the power plants that are presently on the drawing board. Will fusion be scalable? Well, that actually is a very, very good question, and the jury is still out on that. We in my opinion, we should spend much more research effort and money on reducing the raw materials needed and looking into what is needed for the scale-up. Because small issues times 10,000 become big issues. Will the development of fusion power be accelerated by the startups and the role of industry? Yes, no doubt about it. We see the combined effect of synergies, but also competition, and the race between geopolitical parties. And it's all accelerating the development of fusion. See what happened with the development of the vaccines for COVID. Should we accept fusion as a gift from the super rich? Well, a gift from the rich, really? But generally, no, it shouldn't be a gift. We need to develop fusion in collaboration in a public-private partnership. And as the economist Mariana Mazzucato would say, we mustn't socialize the cost of the development only to privatize the profits. But the backing of the startups, the early backing of the startups by venture capitalists has definitely set things in motion. Let me end with a call to action. Well, this brings me to the finale of my final lecture. Where does the Netherlands stand in this pivotal, hyper-dynamic moment in time? Are we in the back seat or are we driving? With the realization that fusion power is becoming a real prospect, this field is becoming ever more integrated. It's cross-disciplinary, integrating physics and engineering and social science. It's integrating academia, industry, and government. And we need to work with the public too, to develop a social license. Now, it so happens that these are all things that the Netherlands are particularly good at. And this is a great moment to step into that arena. Just 3 weeks ago, we had this workshop, the Dutch Fusion Day. And one of the conclusions of that day, now I'm going to tell you, was that the Netherlands is actually very well positioned to present itself as a host country for the first European power plant. We have the infrastructure, the seaports, the connectivity. We have an energy-intensive economy. We have a large population and very little space. We have top-notch high-tech industry, strong international network, many companies that are already involved in ITER or other fusion projects, as well as high-tech companies that have superb capabilities. During that day, the CTO of VDL, Gustav Savenay, said, confronted with the difficult technologies, he said, don't even worry about it. If you can invent it, we can make it. I think it's high time to capitalize on that capacity. DIFRA and TUE are the center of the Dutch Fusion Knowledge Network. It's perhaps not stressed enough, but many faculties, many departments at this university are involved already. Not just physics, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, mathematics and computer science, industrial engineering and innovation science, dozens of researchers in all. IRIS has just recently opened a fusion office with the express purpose of building a national platform that brings industry and academia together. We have, in all modesty, the best fusion master program in the world, right here at the TUE, uncontested, I may say. We have an honors academy student team called Nuclear Fusion Power for the Netherlands, which is developing all the non-technical roadmaps needed to bring fusion power to the Netherlands. And we have all that, and quoting Milena Roveda, the CEO of the European Consortium Gas Fusion, who spoke at the Dutch Fusion Day, who said, fusion needs more Dutchness. She has worked in Holland, by which she meant a boldness and a can-do mentality. So, with no responsibilities left, and only an ocean of holidays ahead of me, can I just call upon you, colleagues, students, executives. The future is in your hands. Make fusion happen. And please don't wait 30 years. Last words. 43 years in national and international fusion research. In academia, it's been quite a journey, and a journey made in good company of many, many, many people. I can mention only just a few. And I hope for the understanding of the hundreds that have also been very important for me that I'm not mentioning today. I should like to remember, thank or greet my teachers and advisors when I started as a PhD student. Professor Kees Braams, inspiring long-time leader of the Dutch Fusion Institute FOM. My promoter Hans de Kluiver, co-promoter Cor Bobeldijk, Luc Ornstein, all of whom are regrettably no longer with us. During a postdoc period at JET, my room and teammates, Ben Tubbing and Theo Ooyevaar, back at Rijnhuizen, the RTP gang with Nout Omens, Tony Donet as group leaders under the inspirational leadership of Chris Schuller, and Marnix van der Wiel, here, as the institute director. The late Professor Frans Sluiter, who admirably smoothed out the somewhat bumpy process leading to my appointment at this university as part-time professor. And that was also the start of my role as academic promoter. A very rewarding experience. And it's great to see that so many of the researchers I had the privilege of guiding went on to have a successful career, often in fusion, and sometimes in industry, and sometimes somewhere else entirely, education or even the arts. And I think the mini symposium earlier today was testimony of that. I had a particularly interesting time directing the Dutch Fusion program from 2001 on, I believe. Interesting, I'm not saying easy, because we had to deal with severe budget cuts for a while. But at the same time, the ITER project was becoming a reality, and there were many new opportunities. I should like to thank Gerard Meijer, later succeeded by Aart Klein, directors of the Institute, for very constructive and energizing collaborations. It was also the time when we stepped up our public affairs efforts, engaging with politicians in the Netherlands, as well as the European Parliament. And here I must mention the great work of Mark Tila Westra, somewhere here too, yes. And Mark Burskens, who tragically passed away last month after a long illness. When I started at the TUE as a full-time professor, I was also appointed chairman of the FOM Executive Board. For about 7 years, that meant an intense and very rewarding collaboration with Wim van Saarloos, the director, and for a short time at the end, Christa Hoyer. And of course, with the many, well, not so many, but many members of the FOM Executive Board and staff at the FOM Bureau. Then we transformed NWO. I had not expected to be back there, but unexpectedly I returned to NWO as the chairman of the science domain, a member of the executive board, and I should like to thank Ariane Steenbrugger, whom I also spotted, yes, the director of the science domain, Stan Giele and Caroline Visser, chair and vice chair of NWO, and all the colleagues of the executive board, the domain boards, and building that new organization was a challenge, but always an interesting one. Members of the complaints committee at this university, the complaints committee on scientific integrity, which I have chaired for about 10 years. If all is well, we don't get any complaints when we have no work at all, but all is not always well. And on those occasions, our work has been intense and difficult. And I should like to thank you, because I learned so much from you. Teaching has always been my greatest pleasure, and working with students in graduation projects has been a joy and an endless source of new research ideas too. So dear students, you inspired me and kept me sharp, and for that I thank you. In the department, the deans, directors, board members who took up the responsibility to run the department, also in difficult times, and the many, many colleagues in other groups with whom I had such pleasurable interactions. In fusion research at TUE, the many colleagues in multiple departments, and of course the DIFFER Institute, presently led with vision and vigor by Marco de Baer, whom I had the pleasure of guiding during his PhD 25 years ago. And tightening the circle even further, I come to the fusion group that we started with a small but very tight-knit team with Klazien Cyrus from the very start, Roger Jaspers, Hans Oosterbeek, Maarten de Bok. Most of them have left, but Roger is still here, of course. Then somewhat later expanded with Helene Kemperman, who retired last month, Herman de Jong, with Tony Donet and Guido Huismans as part-time professors. And yet, somewhat later, new energy was injected into the team by Josephine Prol and Felix Warmer, and part-time members Thomas Morgan and Jonathan Citrin. Working with all of you has been a pleasure and a privilege, and thank you for that. Then there has been a whole group of PhD students, there are too many to mention all individually, and postdoc, Sam Ward, whom I've already mentioned, with whom I've worked the past years. Thank you so much for a wonderful time together. I need to say a few last words to Klazien and Helene. As the group secretaries, you have been the stable core of the group, as well as the master's program. You've kept us together. You have looked after the staff and the students alike, and after me in particular. And all of that with both a smile and unbelievable dedication. So for that, I should like to thank you. Roger, I can't even begin to mention all the ways in which you have been essential to the group and the master's program. We have done so many things together. FuseNet, the master's program, educational innovations. The successes of all of these are actually mostly yours. All I can say is a big, big thank you, and keep up the good work. I trust students will flock in droves now. And finally, my personal inner circle. Let me switch to Dutch here. Mijn ouders, Ben en Iet, zijn al geruime tijd overleden. Als je een nakomertje bent en je gaat met pensioen op je 67ste. Maar ze zijn op allerlei manieren aanwezig, en zeker op een dag als deze. Mijn oudere broer en zus Ernst, over uit Frankrijk, en Manja en hun partners Marjolein en Michiel. Vaste sterren in mijn firmament al eigenlijk zo lang als ik mij kan herinneren. En mij door het op te trekken met Els in de schoot geworpen geweldige familie van de Kam, Jan en de onlangs overleden Wil, Anneke, neven en nichten. En tenslotte bruisende bron van trots en vreugde. Els, onze kinderen Wolf, Raaf en Rosa, met Michael, inmiddels ouders van onze 2 kleinkinderen Abel en Lena. Ik heb gezegd. Dankjewel. Oh, kijk. Zo. Ah, kijk. Dank jullie wel. Dan ga ik hier zitten.
And will be continued. Of course, on a day like today, there are many in this room that would like to say a few words to you, but in the interest of time, we've managed to limit it to 2, and the rest of you can have your chats at the bowl afterwards, of course. So right now, I'd like to invite to the stage somebody already mentioned, the current chair of the Fusion Group, Professor Roger Jaspers. And I'm just now realizing, while you walk up here, that we have a chairing issue. I'll just grab yours for now. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Jaspers.
take my time. Yes. Dear Niek, look at this. I have brought along the crystal ball that you know so very well. But before I delve into that, let me first compliment you on your valedictory lecture. Once again, it was a true pleasure to listen to your talk. Every time you managed to captivate me with your concise style, your sharp insight, your logical reasoning, rhetorical structure, and unmistakable humor. This is precisely why I was drawn to fusion research about 30 years ago. This crystal ball, for many, it symbolizes predicting the future. So let's take a look at what it reveals. Indeed, a fusion power plant. This vision of the futures seems quite fitting after your lecture. Will we indeed have large-scale fusion energy production by the end of this century? Many of us scientists have plenty to say about it, but a thorough study or reasoning of what it entails is something that you have significantly contributed to over the past decade, with success. With a bit of imagination, I can even see the Dutch flag waving on top of this plant. I place this crystal ball here as a metaphor for the future. If we want to realize the fusion potential in the near future, we must truly commit to training a new generation of fusion engineers. And yes, that is where this ball comes in once again. Only students completing the Fusion Master Program at TU Eindhoven will receive this crystal ball along with the diploma. You don't have it yet. Yeah. Now it's even more clear why I also have this ball for you. Besides your research into the deployment of fusion, your prime activity at this university was the Fusion Masters Program. We are both proud of the program we have established here. Unique in the world, and not just that. The European Fusion Education Network, FuseNet, you're also the founding father of that. It was because of your initiative that students all over the world can profit from realizing how important they are for fusion. By now, the association has supported over 1,500 fusion students who are crucial to realize your envisioned future. Tomorrow, I'm heading to the US because there they also want to learn how we approach this so that they too can accelerate fusion. Your visionary outlook is now being embraced by other major players in the field. Your contribution to the scientific and academic landscape in Eindhoven, in the Netherlands, in Europe, extends beyond fusion. I could easily spend my time here listing all the activities outside of the field, but I thought it was more appropriate to leave that to others. Therefore, I've asked Jolanda Haarbraken, representing your non-fusion pursuits, to shed light on that aspect in a minute. Back to my crystal ball that I have here. What are the scientific achievements that people in the future will still remember of Niek Lopes Cardozo? So in the future, yeah. I think it's the importance of the electron transport in the fusion reactor, the added value of Magnum PSI in tackling the plasma wall issues, ITER and L, the 3D printing of diverted components to hold liquid metals, or my own dearest memory, our discovery of the runaway snake. Yes. I could go on. You have made crucial contributions to a multitude of very different subjects, often integrating existing knowledge from outside the fusion field into it. However, the crystal ball cannot show everything. So these aspects, like the personal and social qualities, we cannot visualize in here. It cannot be captured in this 3D image. But Niek, your greatest asset has always been, for me personally, your ability to inspire and motivate. Your passion for fusion is infectious, and your ability to explain complex ideas in a clear and convincing manner has left an ineffaceable mark on everyone who has had the privilege of working with you. Your legacy lies not only into your scientific contributions, but also in the countless minds you have touched and shaped. They will determine the future. And Niek, take a good look at the future yourself. You have paved the way for us, dedicating your career to ensure that even after your retirement, there is a capable, competent, and highly motivated workforce ready to go. As you just said, the future is in their hands. Make fusion happen in your lifetime. Yeah? So, Niek, I want to end here by also personally thank you once again for our long, enjoyable, and successful collaboration, for all the energy you have ignited in me, for being a source of inspiration. I'm also certain that I can express that same gratitude on behalf of all the members of the Fusion Group, for whom you have always strived to make sure that they had the opportunity to develop fully. Thank you for everything, and I wish you a wonderful future.
Well, thank you, Roger and Kees, for inviting me to speak about the role that Niek has played in scientific integrity in our university. And I thank you especially for inviting me to speak about this topic and not about nuclear fusion. Scientific integrity is at the heart of doing research. The guiding principles in conducting scientific research are honesty, scrupulousness, transparency, independence and responsibility, according to the Netherlands Code of Conduct. It is very important that researchers and also students are made aware of these principles and that they are guided by their supervisors and senior scientists to understand how to uphold these principles in their daily practice. And Niek, you have played a crucial part in this. The TUE has a complaints committee, you mentioned yourself, that deals with complaints about scientists who are accused of acting in violation of the principles of scientific integrity. And you have chaired that complaints committee for almost 10 years. During these 10 years, you have dealt with a number of cases and talked with numerous complainants and defendants. We have been working together for the last 3 years. And for me, the procedures were unfamiliar in the beginning, and I was very lucky to be able to turn to you for advice. The most valuable lesson that I learned from you is that every story has two sides. And it is our duty to postpone any judgment until both sides of the story have been told. Now, this sounds much easier than it actually is. The members of the complaints committee have the highest regard for you in your role as chair of the committee. They emphasize that you work in a very structured manner and that you work fast and thoroughly, but they mostly praise you for being truly concerned with both the complainant as well as the defendant, for being impartial, cautious, and at the same time, authoritative. They also value your efforts to address the underlying problem, instead of focusing purely on the complaint itself. About 2 years ago, you were asked to chair the advisory committee on the revision of the complaints committees at TUE. And instead of purely advising on another structure for the complaints committees, as we agreed upon with the executive board, you were dedicated to addressing the culture and leadership practices at our university as well. This has resulted in a very elaborate report with no less than 23 recommendations. And I'm very proud to say that these recommendations will all find their way into our new Integrity and Social Safety Desk and the accompanying integrity program that we are currently working on. Now, the reason that you insisted on addressing leadership and culture issues in this report is your personal belief that leadership and the exemplary role of senior staff and management is crucial for upholding the principles of scientific integrity in our community. And in fact, that is exactly what you yourself have been doing all this time. You are leading by example. For instance, you started playing the dilemma game with your students during the science ethics lunches in your department. And you started this because you felt it was important that students learn to reflect on topics related to scientific integrity. And luckily, as I understand, that Roger will continue with this initiative. So Niek, I want to thank you very much for your legacy on this important topic. Thank you for everything you've done to strengthen the scientific integrity within TUE, and for continuing to do so even after your retirement. I thank you on behalf of our executive board, in the words of our rector magnificus, Sylvia Leenaerts, who says she highly values your professionalism and your expertise. I also thank you on behalf of the members of the Complaints Committee, who praise you for your personal way of working and for maintaining calm in sometimes exciting cases. And personally, I want to thank you for being the person you are, for being the role model we all need, and for being a supportive and inspiring mentor to me. Thank you.
And with that, dear audience, we come to the end of this valedictory lecture. Niek, thank you once again for an inspiring afternoon and for sharing your final words of wisdom with us. I trust we'll be seeing you around here from time to time, and hope we can continue some of these discussions that were started today then. For the audience now, in a short moment, we are going to go to the reception, which will be in the Senaatszaal, which is out that door. And the way we're going to do that is, first of all, the Beadle will lead off the cortege, and I ask all of you to please stand up while they exit the room and wait until all of them have exited the room. Leading the cortege, of course, will be Niek himself. You can bring your partner along if she doesn't want to wait too long to congratulate you on a wonderful success today. So I now propose that we thank once again Professor Lopes Cardozo for his illustrious career here and for all he has accomplished, and then off to drinks with us. Thank you.